You will see that I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. Professor Goos actually thought for a moment I did and he nearly fainted. I'm well known for not going with the flow and doing those normal things. And having looked, seen some of the finger trouble and those whizzing presentations and things, I'm actually quite relieved. The title that you gave me was very open-ended, so I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about consumer response to this crisis, because those of us who are in journalism and those of you mainly who are in the food industry may get the sense that this crisis is very much occupying. What am I? Oh, you need to see me. Oh, okay. I did that on purpose. That it's very much a big deal for the general population. My sense is that it's not at all. So what I did, well, first of all, 2 weeks ago I was up here in Johannesburg at a convention centre in Sandton for the Car Awards, Car.co's Car of the Year Awards, and they're at tea time. What was it? It wasn't the, I think it was the judge. What are we doing? I've gone blank. Oh yes, sorry. After the awards there was a dealer conference. I made a dealer conference, and at tea time there was just a selection of every kind of deli meat you can imagine, served in various forms. And because I've been speaking to Lucia a lot, mainly, I was like, I won't be choosing that ham one. And I sort of mentioned it just chattily to the people around me, and they were all like, huh, what? Like, no resonance at all. Okay, those were a bunch of people in the motor industry. And then I had to laugh. Yesterday at tea time, we had quite a bit of ham going on as well. And you mentioned, I hope we don't have ice cream. And I don't think there was, but we had ham. And so, yeah, it was just interesting for me. So what I did was, I thought, let me find out. It's very subjective and not very scientific to just speak to the people around you to find out whether, this whole crisis and the media exposure around it, which actually hasn't been all that prolific, has changed the way people are eating, the choices they're making. So I thought, well, one way of doing that is to phone my very good, or email rather, my very good contacts with the various supermarket groups and ask them if they'd seen a drop in sales at the deli counters. So I did that, and let me see, going through my PowerPoint presentation, Peter. Fruit and Veg City Food Lovers Market butchery manager has confirmed that despite the outbreak and the widespread media coverage relating to it, we have not seen a decline in our deli processed meat sales at all. ShopRite Group, we've not seen a decrease in deli sales, no shift in buying patterns that can be ascribed to the listeriosis outbreak at all. And of course, like listeriosis itself, these groups have a major footprint in all parts of this country. And then they go on to say the group, that's the ShopRite Group, has a well-developed risk assessment program in place that confirms the adherence to food safety and hygiene protocols in its supermarkets. This follows blah, blah, blah. So they're basically saying we're doing our bit and basically nothing's changed. We've also instituted an enhanced monitoring plan of on top of our regular independent audits of store food preparation areas and random product testing to detect if a risk of listeriosis is present, which will guide on the need for additional precautionary actions and blah, blah, blah. We advise customers, but I don't know how they're actually doing that apart from responding to my press release. SPAR said we'll try and get an answer, but it's difficult for that group because they have a different business models. All the SPARs are individually owned, so I suppose there wasn't very much motivation for those business owners to respond, which was a little worrying. Pick n Pay said the same as the others, no change at all. Then what was most concerning to me of all was I got hold of a woman who's very well known in Durban. She's been running antenatal and baby clinic for over 20 years. She's the go-to person. She had a radio show. And I said to her, sure, in light of the outbreak, you must be dealing with quite a lot of really anxious moms-to-be and new mothers. And her response was, "I haven't had one question from one mother about the outbreak. I do confess that I haven't educated them about it either, I suppose because I assume the outbreak hasn't affected the social demographic that I deal with." Okay, so there's an assumption there. And I've done a show, I mean, I know I'm only a small part of the media, but I've done a show on East Coast Radio by that time, which the blog had been shared many, many times, and every time we have a new NICD report, I put that out there as well. So I filled her in about the split between state and private hospitals, indicating that this is across the board. And she said, and also that pregnant women are 20 times more likely than other healthy adults to contract listeriosis, and that 43% of those who had died were newborns. And she said, "Wow, literally, wow, that's incredible, Wendy. I will research more and educate more." And I've given her some links so that she can do that. Now, this is a very experienced, very influential person that works in that space, the most affected part of the population, and she had absolutely, this was last week, not December, not January, this was last week. So again, not a very big sample to be sure, but it does give an indication of what we're dealing with here in terms of awareness. Online, I had a look at some of the comments to my stories that had been posted on various Facebook sites. And in the absence of really hard-hitting and widespread communication about listeriosis, there are, of course, conspiracy theories. So you get things like 19th of January, had Tabang saying, "We didn't have the listeriosis." What? Oh, we didn't have the listeriosis problem before. That's the assumption, because most people are only hearing about it now, if they're hearing about it at all. "This might have been caused by importing reject chickens. The South African government caused this massive outbreak by ignoring the early cases. 767 outbreaks. How did it get to 10, 8, or even 5? Did the doctors report it to the health department?" And I think this speaks to something we were talking about at the lunch break, and that the NICD did keep this quiet for rather too long. I don't know what the intention was there, because it really should have been brought to the public's attention. I think when I looked at the figures, it really started to go crazy in about August. So at least by then, there should have been press releases put out. There should have been press conferences. I think it's shocking that didn't happen. And then this guy concludes by saying, "Even worse, the outbreak is spread across all 9 provinces. Please investigate more and be safe. Avoid chicken." Okay. And then when I tweeted earlier today, based on Lucia's presentation, I said latest stats, 872 cases, 164 deaths. "We are still in the peak phase," said Dr. Lucia Anelish at today's food-focused Listeria workshop. "We can expect hundreds more cases and many more deaths in the next few weeks unless we can find the source and remove it from the shelves," which was pretty much the crux of it for me. And someone retweeted that with the comment, "Nice to know we have to stop eating until the listless food detectives get their acts together." Okay. So you're going to get a lot of that, I think, because it was unjustifiably and unforgivably, in my view, kept quiet. No good ever comes from trying to keep these things under wraps. Just ask Zuma. Eventually they come out, and it comes out a whole lot worse. So I think we can't go back and undo that. But I think, what can we do going forward? As a journalist, I was trying to think why there's apathy, lack of knowledge, lack of, in that antenatal clinic woman's case, just a total lack of awareness, and just fails to get the impact. And I think it's because it's so far been, apart from one case study that I remember in Carte Blanche, it's been a nameless, faceless tragedy and crisis. So when people read it, it's just a bunch of numbers. And I, as a journalist, know that to make stories, to make information stick, You need to tell stories. So when I train on the Consumer Protection Act, I don't stand up in a PowerPoint presentation and go through what the Act says. I tell the stories of the dozens and scores and hundreds of cases that I've dealt with that the Act speaks to. And that's what makes the information stick for people. So why do we care about, 800, I've lost count, 72, whatever it is, and 167 deaths, up from 107 last week. I mean, my goodness, that's 57 if my maths is right. I mean, it's horrifying, but we can't actually feel it because we're not seeing the grieving families of those babies who've died. And I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, but I mean, what motivation would that family have to think, well, there's that Wendy Knowler journalist who's been writing about listeria. Maybe I should contact her, email her and see if she'd like to interview us. And it's not going to happen that way. So I don't know what we do to change that. As an aside, I actually thought I might actually have a case to work on and make this real, albeit slightly foreign. But I heard of, through a friend on Facebook, as one does, of a young Australian man a gay man, which would have made it a bit tricky to deal with because you don't want to insinuate that he was HIV positive, and given everything I know, I don't think he was. His partner is a former South African who came out here in December to spend some time with his family, and his partner, who is an estate agent in Sydney, they both lived in Sydney, he came out to join him on Boxing Day. So on the 26th of December, he left Sydney. He arrived here on the 27th. He celebrated his 32nd birthday, I think, on the 30th of December in a Cape Town restaurant, and on the 2nd of January he was dead. And the words doing the round in the Facebook posts by his grieving partner and family was that it was listeriosis. So of course I'd messaged the friend who was the partner's family, sort of, and said, could you put me in touch? And so he's grieving, he's not going to work, he's not reaching out to anyone, but eventually he did. And the last I heard was they were still awaiting for the autopsy to confirm listeriosis from here, from South Africa. And I've been thinking about it. I'm no scientist, but that would seem to be like among the fastest. What's the word? Incubation, yeah, from he arrived in the country on the 27th and he was dead on the 2nd of Jan. Could have brought it from Australia, who knows, but all the symptoms and Bill Mahler actually shared with me some videos of people in the end stages of listeriosis, and it sounds pretty much the same. But anyway, the bottom line is I have not personally, as hard as I've tried, been able to get any human interest out of this story at all, and that is what we need, and I don't know how we make it happen, those of you who may have contacts, but we need to start telling these stories to garner public interest, to get the message out, to protect those who are high risk, who perhaps are going about their lives blissfully unaware. It's the only thing we can do as journalists until the source is found. We are so disconnected from the food chain. We have a relationship with the retailer that we buy the food from, and maybe we can contact the manufacturer, but beyond that, we are very disconnected and we don't have the power to ask the right questions. Someone said to me earlier, what are the food manufacturers doing to try and reassure their customers or consumers with the steps that they're taking to do all the sorts of things that we've been seeing for 2 days. Are they putting videos on their websites and that sort of thing? And I'm getting this from Linda, and I would agree. I haven't gone to look, but I can assure you that they would be sending them to me in a press release to say, we'd like you to know, and they're not. So I'm getting none of that. So literally, as a journalist who's interested in this issue, my only real source is the people that I'm turning to. Well, Food Focus is doing their bit. Thanks to you. I mean, if I hadn't been up for the Zuma drama, I wouldn't have actually seen your tweet about the latest cases and quickly updated the copy that I'd put out to go at 6 o'clock this morning on Times Live. It would have had the wrong. I don't understand how we sat here the whole day and had an NICD person here and were working with figures that were 57 deaths out of date. But anyway, Yeah, I think so. That my only sources, sorry, are Linda and Lucia, who's been fantastic. I think the public owes her a great debt of gratitude for actually taking the information and making it live for us. And of course, the NICD via Lucia. But I mean, those are my sources as a journalist who's shown great interest in the topic, in doing my bit to get the word out and to get decent information so that people can protect themselves. So I just think therein lies some of the problem. The rest of the world seems to be treating this as more of a crisis than we are. And I'm open to suggestion from those of you working in the field as to how we change that. I would like to interview families. I would like to interview anyone who's interested in sharing something that my job is to look after the consumers, so to share information that consumers would benefit from. Solid, I don't know, actually even the most basic information is very sensationalist. You don't need to do anything to the numbers but put them out there. But as I say, people need the stories. It needs to be human interest. So anybody that can help me with that, I'd be very happy to hear from. I'm on Twitter at Wendy Knowler, and my email address is there. So thank you very much.